Hello, we are going to go over how to complete the Illusions of Space worksheet. Each one of these boxes is a different type of how to show space in your artwork. So the first one is positive, negative space. So the positive is the object that you're putting into your space provided, and the negative is all of the other space around it. Both of these are equally important, and you have to consider where you're putting the positive in your space in order to balance out the entire space that you have provided. So for this worksheet, each one of these rectangles, you want to imagine like this is your entire piece of paper. So you need to fill the entire space that's provided. So for the first example, I'm just going to do some simple shapes. It doesn't matter what you're putting in there. I'm just trying to balance out the space provided. And the way that I'm going to differentiate between what's the positive and the negative is I'm going to shade in my positive. So in all of the shapes that you put in, just make sure that you entirely shade that shape. Again, it doesn't matter what you're putting in here. You can do any kind of organic shapes, but shapes are flat, okay? We're not shading these to show the form of anything. This is just balancing our positive and negative space. So, quickly get these shaded in. And I'm trying to make sure that I've got a good balance of my positive and my negative. So the negative is this flowing space that's going all the way in between and around the positives. If you wanted to, you could have, an opening in one of your positives. That's okay. Now this is negative space and this is positive space. You could add a few more little positives. Try to balance like 50-50%. Now, not all compositions do that, but for this exercise, try to balance about 50-50%. So that's positive, negative. Okay. The next rectangle is about detail. So the way that you show space through detail is that objects that get farther away, they have less detail. So what I want you to do is draw the same object at least 2 or 3 times, and it should appear like it's getting farther away by the amount of detail that you put into it. So, for example, if I drew a sunflower, so here's the start of my sunflower, and I'm going to put a lot of detail in the implied texture. I'm not actually looking at a sunflower. This is just what I remember sunflowers to look like in my head. So okay, and then big petals. And then in the petals, they would have details, and they'd have more petals behind it. So this one is the closest. It's in my foreground, it's really large, it's got a lot of different detail. I can see all the different textures that are in that flower. I'm going to draw one a little bit farther away. And I'm not going to pay really close attention to trying to draw all of those petals perfect this time, because it's farther away in the distance. So I can still see some texture here, but not as much detail. Okay. And I'll put a few more way back here. Those ones have even less detail. Okay, and that is how you show the difference in detail as things get farther away. Linear perspective, this is using the vanishing point, which is a point which your eye recedes to in the distance to show you accurate perspective on objects as they recede into the distance. So very quickly, I have another tutorial on this, so I'm not gonna spend too much time, but here's my vanishing point on my horizon line. I'm going to use my ruler to trace around. So I have two parallel lines on the outside of the ruler, and I'm going to flip it and do that again. So I'm tracing around the ruler, and that quickly got me a nice square. I'm going to connect these three edges that are closest to the vanishing point. These are converging lines, and this is using linear perspective to show the illusion of depth that the form is getting, appears to be getting smaller in the distance. Now to finish this up correctly, this is 1 point perspective because I only have one vanishing point. I'm going to put another parallel line here to follow this contour. I'm just going to slide this over very carefully without trying to shift my ruler. And then I'm going to line up my ruler with the top of the cube and then carefully slide it up. If you don't have a ruler at home, you could get another piece of paper and fold it a couple times and get a really nice crease and use that as an edge. But you have to do this using a ruler. Okay, so there's linear perspective. It appears to be getting smaller in the distance. The next rectangle is overlapping. So when you place an object on top of another object, it appears to be closer to you in the space. Okay, so again, we can use something really simple. Let's do this part of a circle, and I can show part of another circle. Part of another one. And maybe I have this other, just another kind of shape back here. They all don't have to be the same. Okay. But the way I'm going to differentiate between these is I'm just going to shade in some of these. So then it makes it really obvious what is overlapping what shape. Maybe this just has a texture on it. Overlapping. Overlapping is super important. A lot of times students want to place everything really separate into their composition, and it doesn't end up looking balanced, and there's a lot of flow issues. So overlapping is really important. It creates a much more rich composition and gives it a lot more depth so that it doesn't appear flat. Okay, size changes. This refers to you have to repeat the same object in your composition in different points, whether it's the foreground, middle ground, or background. And objects in the distance appear to become smaller. So let's do, I'm just going to do a pine tree. And I'm applying some of the same things, like I'm going to put more detail in this as well. So I'm drawing the direction of the pine needles as they come down on the tree. And then you can see this tree is a little bit farther back in the middle ground. Has less details. And then way back here, this might be a line of pine trees in the distance. Go ahead and put a horizon line here. So these still count. This is my implied pine trees in the distance. So I've shown 3 different sizes. This is like a whole forest back here. A large, medium, and very small in the background. Okay. The next one is value difference. So objects in the distance become lighter. A really easy way to show this is to do kind of a gradation of, you want to think of like looking at a mountain range as the values get lighter and lighter in the distance. So in order to do this, I'm going to draw just kind of an implied mountain range, and I'm going to shade this in really light as I can. Try to make sure that the edge of your contour is the same value, so it's not a lot darker. Don't give a heavy outline here. Okay, shade that all the way down. I'm going to draw another contour and make sure that that other value goes all the way down to that edge. And let's do like one more contour in the foreground. Okay, so you need to differentiate between the 3 different values. The one farthest away should be the lightest. The one so that's in your background, it's farthest away. The one in the middle, in your middle ground, should be the next darkest value. And then the mountain ridge closest to you in the foreground should be darkest in value. So follow this edge. I'm pressing really hard. Take your time. I'm going really quickly. And just make sure you shade in the entire area. Okay. Last one is vertical location. So what this refers to is the placement of where you're putting things in your space. Objects that are higher in a picture plane tend to be farther away. So like these would be in your background. In the middle would be things in your middle ground, and the things that are on the bottom of your picture would be in the foreground. So I'll just do this kind of blobby shape. Here's another blobby shape, and I'm going to put a really little, couple little blobby shapes up here at the top. So this is about the placement, the vertical location. So if it's lower, it's closer to us. If it's higher, it's farthest away. And that is it.